Welcome to the SaaS Backwards podcast, where we reverse engineer the success of fast-growing SaaS firms and explore strategies CMOs and CEOs are using to drive their businesses forward.
Hey, welcome everyone to SaaS Backwards, a podcast that helps SaaS CMOs and CEOs to accelerate growth and enhance profitability. Our guest today is the one and only Dan Tyre. Dan joined HubSpot as a member of the original team in 2007. Is that employee number 6, Dan? Is that correct?
That's right. I got a Manchester United jersey that says Tyre number 6 on the back. Isn't that badass? Oh yeah, baby.
That's it. You've led recruiting, training, and growth of HubSpot sales, and you're a sales inspiration to many of us, run workshops to help people to master sales techniques for the modern world. And at HubSpot, you've pioneered the concept of alignment between the sales and marketing organizations known as smarketing, a core tenet of inbound marketing, now followed by really tens of thousands of companies around the world. Dan co-wrote The Inbound Organization with Todd Hockenberry, and we're definitely going to talk about that as we start out here. But before we get going, Dan, welcome and thank you for joining us on the podcast. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you've manifested sales success at HubSpot.
Wow, that's a good first question. I like that. First of all, I'm a huge fan of Ken Leppett and Austin Lawrence. I've known you for 3, 4, 5 years, and you're a righteous dude. You're very smart about this, and I'm pleased to be a guest on your podcast. You're 100% right. First of all, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. My 2020, which is hard because of civil unrest, global pandemic, and political instability, it should have been hard. It was a 10 out of 10. Oh my goodness. Amazing. I'm blessed because I'm a tech worker. And so I didn't have to deal with a lot of disruption and challenges. Working in SaaS just does that for you. I work for the greatest company in the world, HubSpot, full-time employee at HubSpot. I got 5 jobs at HubSpot because 4 isn't enough. Like I write for the sales blog. Like you said, I teach our partners how to engage with customers in the inbound revolution. I work for HubSpot for Startups, a program I started in 2010. I run a mentor program for people inside and outside of HubSpot. Today, we're going to talk about a variety of different things, specifically scaling of SaaS and how you can increase your revenue and profitability with an inbound leadership principle.
I think that's a great segue, and thanks for pumping up the volume here. In order to be successful, you have to have a vision and you have to be concrete about what it's going to take to do it. You have to be willing to change reality in your way. And as an example, when I told my team, hey, I want to do a podcast because I feel that it's an important way to engage our potential customers, everybody was like, oh no, not another one of these things. And I was like, no, we're going to do it. And I had to manifest it. You motivate people to manifest change in their businesses. And I think that's a great segue to go into the book.
All right, just hold on a second, because you dropped like some wisdom bombs there. Number one, I was just quoted in Inc. magazine about the 3 kind of things that companies need to do. The first thing they need to do is always have a plan. It has to be a written plan. I can't tell you the number of entrepreneurs, SaaS companies. And I'm like, where's your 2021 forecast by month of your revenue, your new customers, your expenses, your headcount? And they're like, well, I got an old spreadsheet. I'm like, no. It's the 7th of January. I would need to see that now. And if you don't have that, I'll send you a template. But if you don't have that, there's no way you're going to be successful. If you look at it every day, if you understand how to plan, every SaaS company listen to this podcast have 2 jobs. Number 1, you got to hit your number, right? Don't miss your number. Number 2, you got to plan for the next phase, because no matter what you hit in 2021, your board or your advisors or your shareholders are going to want you to do 3X. So everybody in SaaS has 2 jobs. That's just the pace and the way it works. And so you always have to have a plan. Number 2, you actually have to manage the plan. Based on my startup experience, I get 40 business plans a month. People are always sending to me, I'm an angel investor. I have 26, 27 angel investments. And they're like, we need your money. There's 2 types of companies. Number 1, there's companies who have taken a small amount of money, just a ridiculously small amount of money, like 40 grand, and proved the concept. And I'm like, wait a second, you did all that with 40 grand? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, you're a good entrepreneur. And then there's other people who are like, I need $1 million to prove this business model. Okay, you got a rich uncle? They're like, no. I go, do you have a cash out of a first startup? They're like, no. Good luck. You're going to spend all your time raising money. You haven't done squat yet. That's not being an entrepreneur. And over the last 12 years with low interest rates and a very accretive startup ecosystem, that was an option. It's not going to be an option moving forward. You got to prove the concept going forward. That manifestation, right? I'm a big believer in goal setting. You have to write down your goals. On dantyre.com, you'll see Dan Tyre's 2020 goals, and you'll see my 2021 goals. And you'll see on my 2020 goals, it goes done, done, done. I give out this book. It's called Succeed, How We Accomplish Our Goals by Heidi Grant. She's a Columbia PhD. She's brilliant. She spent 2 years researching this process. And it said, if you write down your goal, you got to write them down. In all my public presentations, I go, raise your hand if you got goals. Everybody raises their hand. Then I go, how many people have them written down? Half the hands go down. I go, those aren't goals. Those are dreams. If you don't have them written down, how am I going to look at them? How are you going to manifest? And I have my goals on my Evernote. I look at them every day. And you'll see I've set goals for, 38 years. On my 2020 goals, it says done, done, done. Sometimes it says in process. Sometimes it says tabled. Sometimes it says missed. Those are way the minority. Because now, after 38 years, I know exactly how to set them. So the reason why is that I know exactly what I'm going to do. That intentionality and what you talk about is manifest. That means this is kind of the secret of life. At least for me, I know what I'm going to do in 2021. I know and have a 3 and 5 year plan. And so it's like a North Star. All I got to do is execute that plan and boom, I'm feeling good about what I decided to do. I'm feeling good about that intentionality and that manifestation that you talk about. If you don't have that, how are you going to manifest something? How do you know what to hope for? And then there's a whole series of ways that you can make it work better for you. So every SaaS owner, I'm telling you right now, if you're listening to this podcast, you don't have a monthly forecast. It has to have revenue, new customers. It has to have expenses, and it has to have headcount. Send an email to Ken. He'll forward it to me. And we'll give you a template so that you can do it so that you can manifest your success in 2021.
So that's amazing. So that's our first offer for listeners here with Dan.
3 calls to action. Number 1, just ping Ken because he's a good guy and he knows how to bring the leads to the yard. Austin Lawrence has been around for how long, Ken?
Since 1981. It's going to be 40 years this year.
Yeah. And you know how to bring the leads to the yard. You also understand the pivot. Ken is very vested in the digital revolution, what we call the inbound revolution. I've been doing inbound now for 14 years. I've done 5 startups. My first startup went to $1.5 billion before any of your listeners were born. My second startup, I started in my dining room and over 10 years grew it to a $30 million company. And it was amazing. My third startup went bankrupt, which taught me business planning. This is why I pound the table. I'm on the board of directors of a professional services company in 2020. It was called Incorporate Massage. We sent out people to massage your back. Do you like back massages, Ken?
Oh, yeah.
Most people do. And they have all the statistics that said how it relates to employee retention and happiness. They love it. And this lady, Amelia Wilcox, she had a contingency plan. And when we saw the global pandemic coming, she modeled a 90% reduction in on-site massage. Turns out the industry went to zero.
Like a few weeks, right?
Yeah, you couldn't do anything. But she had a plan and she pivoted. And it is an amazing story. Now she has 17,000 of MRR in a streaming tech company and is growing like a weed. But she had that plan. She was able to manifest the ability for her to turn that around. And it was because of my experience bringing a company into bankruptcy. It was hard at the time, but I learned how to do it. Like it's a skill of taking a company into chapter 7, chapter 11, and then bringing back out again if it's possible. My fourth startup, it's kind of a SaaS business, but it's a collaborative software company. And that's where I met Brian Halligan. And the company was sold to Microsoft. Lucky me, right? And then when they started HubSpot, Brian called me. He's like, you're the best startup guy I ever met. And you can sell. And our software isn't that good, so we need somebody who can sell. And I work for this guy, Mark Roberge. Write that one down. This is the second takeaway. He's got a book called The Sales Acceleration Formula. He's a general partner in a venture capital company called Stage 2 Capital with Jay Poe, and he helps SaaS companies scale. He wrote this book, The Sales Acceleration Formula, how we went from $0 to $100 million in SaaS revenue in 7 years, and he did it all. And he took us from nothing, right? When I started HubSpot, we had 3 customers, and now HubSpot has 95,000 customers. Now HubSpot's almost $1 billion. But Mark wrote definitively about $0 to $100 million, which I'm assuming most of your SaaS listeners are somewhere in there. This shows how to put the sales motion in place. The book that I wrote is called The Inbound Organization, and that's ancillary. We were talking in the briefing meeting this morning, Ken, and you're like, why did you write the book? And I wrote the book because people thought that inbound was just sales and marketing tactics. And in reality, it's a business philosophy that's never been more relevant. I have the best co-author in the history of books, Todd Hockenberry, who should be on this podcast. He tells me, you're in the HubSpot bubble. And I'm like, what does that mean? He goes, no one has what HubSpot has as you're scaling. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You can go to www.inboundorganization.com. That's the third call to action. On there, there's an assessment that we'll talk about that will help you understand how aligned you are with inbound organization. And inbound organization is it's a management philosophy that plays perfectly into 2021. Number one, it's all about treating people like human beings. And you'd think you wouldn't have to remind people about that, but it's critically important. When you're engaging your customers, you got to make sure that you're treating people like human beings. That means you can't buy lists. That means you can't spam people. That means customization and engagement is super important. And that's the foundation for the inbound organization. Isn't that the way you treat your customers, Ken?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You treat your prospects the same way you treat your customers.
As an agency, we're certainly focusing on individuals and the companies they work for as the most important element in our own sales and marketing. The podcast is a great example of that. We primarily speak with people that we'd like to do business with or that can edify the people we'd like to do business with.
Okay, for 39 years, you've all been doing that. Way before I wrote the book or we had the inbound revolution, you were just now, it's a people business, right? Every business is a people business. My buddy, John Landry, is the CIO of IBM around 1993, 1994. He goes, software is a great business except for the people. I'm like, John, you can't say that. That's horrible. It's all about the people. He was a super smart guy. He was very, very technical. He understood everything except the people side of the business side. He was a good guy, so I don't want to throw him under the bus. He knew a lot of stuff about scaling companies, but he's like, the problem is the people. And I'm like, no, the reason we're doing this is the people, scaling businesses. And of course, SaaS is a revolution. The SaaS revolution is amazing. It's a win-win-win. It's better for the manufacturer. It's better for the customer. It's better for the end user. And now we're in SaaS 2. SaaS 2 means the applications that you get are super easy. I had somebody, my heart swelled with pride. On a chat board, somebody said, using HubSpot is like a video game. And I'm like, what? They're like, no, it's so clean. It's so easy. My salespeople don't really need training on it, which is not true. They do need some training and understanding deal, but it's like not that hard. There's support right in the product and it looks pretty and it looks like a modern application.
The feedback we get on HubSpot is that it's become easier and easier to engage with. So that I think they're doing a great job there. I want to turn back to the book. So there's a couple of things. First of all, I'd like to talk about how adopting the principles of being an inbound organization is important for software companies. And I'll share an anecdote with you after we get through there. But if you could just tell us, from your experience, you look at hundreds of companies a year, why this is important to software companies.
Yeah. Because it's the basis for doing business. Every business is a people business. In 2021, Ken, do you want somebody to help you or sell you?
I'd prefer to be assisted.
Why?
Well, because it's my mission. I want to get what I want to get done.
Yeah. You don't really care about all the ancillary stuff. The last thing you want to do is buy more software. What you want to do is solve your business pain. Therefore, adopting an inbound philosophy is critically important. Number one, you treat people like human beings. That's not so small feat. When we do our management consulting, do you like a sales funnel? And the CEO, sitting in front of the CEO, goes, yeah, I love my sales funnel. I'm like, no. Do you like being in somebody else's sales funnel? And they're like,
no freaking way. No freaking way.
Exactly. I'm like, let's call your front desk. And they're like, what? I'm like, let's call your front desk. Let's see if we can get to a salesperson. They're like, no. I'm like, why not? I go, have you ever done that before? And they're like, maybe not in 10 years. I'm like, it's time. This is going to hurt, but let's do it. You go into a phone tree in 2021, all you SaaS owners out there, if you got a phone tree and you don't have a bot on your website, you call Ken right now. Today, Ken can have a bot on your website by Friday. Even it's every business is a people business. Sometimes I don't want to talk with people. Sometimes I just want to get the status of my order. I want to understand what's going on. I want to understand if there's an outage. And that's why a bot is de rigueur for every single company. Every company is a tech company in 2021. You got to be a tech company because I'm not going to buy from somebody who has antiquated technology. I'm not going to buy from somebody who doesn't treat me like a human being. I'm not going to buy from somebody that doesn't help me. And then here's the other things that are critically important. You got to solve for the customer, which you've been doing for 39 years. I've heard you say, it's not a good fit for me. Let me recommend somebody else. Solving for the customer is very important. And then focus beats bandwidth. So I do a lot of this work around what is your ideal customer profile and persona. People fight me on it. They're like, no, I can sell to everybody. I'm like, you can, but you do the best work with SaaS companies. You do the best work with SaaS companies in the Northeast. You do the best work with SaaS companies in the Northeast that are between $1 million and $10 million in revenue. And they're like, that's true. I'm going to stick to that. Do you have 200 folks that you could sell to in that niche? My famous quote is, the riches are in the niches, which is perfectly attuned for 2021. I was not the first to say it, right? 1 million people have said it before, but I pound the table and say it's never been more evident than today. Brian Halligan, the CEO of HubSpot, he's been a big believer in the customer experience is the ultimate competitive advantage. That's the HubSpot flywheel. If you don't have a flywheel, you call Ken, because a flywheel is the way that you met your customers get more customers. Your customers are more important than your sales team. There, I said it. Your marketing department is more important than your sales team. I'm famous for standing on stage and go, CEOs, raise your hand if you're a CEO, and get third of the audience. I'm like, all right. If you have more than 10 salespeople, you go back to the office, you take the lowest 2 performing salespeople, you fire them. They're not going to make their quota anyway. You know it. They're somebody's cousin. They're fudging their numbers. You give all that money to marketing or an outside agency. Why? Because marketing is more important than sales. I go, marketing, if you're not practicing inbound, unless you have 1.5 million contacts, then you're pooched, because the average database atrophies about 27% per year. People move on, they move 27%. That means you constantly need to be refilling. I go, salespeople, you're not getting inbound leads. Quit. Are you kidding me? In 2007, we're mentioning schmarketing. You got to say it with the back of your throat. Schmarketing, right? Somebody's like, smart marketing. I'm like, it's not smart marketing. It's sales and marketing pushed together. I invented that with Mike Volpe, who is now the CEO of Lola. And I got my first inbound leads. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. These people want to talk to me. And Mike is like, yeah, that's why we started the company. I'm like, no, you don't understand. That's 90% of the pain and the activity that I have to go through. And he's like, well, we're hoping that people will understand it. And in fact, an inbound marketing is more important. Marketing now is more important than sales. Do you know this stat, Ken, for SaaS companies, the percentage of the sales process that takes place before somebody wants to talk to a salesperson?
I'm thinking it's close to 70%.
Yeah, it's 85% now. 85%. In the old days, you're like, how much does it cost? And can I start with a free version? And like, how does this work? And does it connect with Salesforce and all that kind of stuff? Today, if that's not on your website, if that's not in a bot, if you can't see that, and if you can't see with the HubSpot flywheel, that's putting your customers on a testimonial so that they understand how that works, you're not doing it right. You want your customers front and center. In the old days, you'd get somebody all the way to the end and you'd say, do you want 3 references? And they'd say, yeah, give me 3 references. And sometimes they'd check it and sometimes they wouldn't. Do you ever get a bad reference? Anybody ever give you a bad reference?
Not ever once.
Now at HubSpot, we say, all right, you're a financial services company. Let me have you talk with 3 people who've just gone through this, right? You're a SaaS company. Let me introduce you to 3 SaaS customers that did this in 2020 so that you can ask them all the questions that if you ask me, I would tell you, but I've got a vested interest and it's amazing. Oh my God, it accelerates everything. We got all these pages of testimonials, all these pages of use case. And then our customers, they will pound the table. They'll be like, if you don't choose HubSpot, right, you do so at your own peril. They've got all these stories, and Halligan was brilliant in talking about this flywheel as a way of accelerating how to get new business in 2020.
I think that's really important. The flywheel, I think, is misunderstood. We look at it as when we meet a new SaaS company, we want to understand how sales, marketing, and customer success are doing their own business, what their tech stack is, what their content looks like, what their business rules and workflows are, how they work together. And we coach CEOs and CMOs is that, the bulk of the revenue actually comes after the sale. I think that was part of the power for me in putting it in this flywheel representation is that these things all have to work together. And now to give people something to latch onto visually as a kind of an organizing concept, I think was really good.
You're 100% right. No question. The sad thing is, you know as well as I do, 80% of companies are still doing it the old way. They still have a marketing organization and a sales organization. They're not aligned, and you can help them align. Number 2, they still treat their prospects horribly. Number three, they don't have customer marketing. HubSpot has like 10 people who market just to our customers to make sure that they stay, right? And to make sure that they understand the value of being a customer. The statistic I throw around is in 2014, the average company had 6 competitors. In 2020, the average company had 44 competitors. And so everybody's circling your customers. And if they're not visiting your website, if they're not getting value all the time, they are suspect to being hijacked from one of those 43 other folks. Oh, here's the other thing, and this plays right into the inbound organization. Data is super important. Everything that we do is driven by data. So we do NPS, eNPS all the time. And explain to our listeners what NPS is.
So the NPS is your net promoter score. It's a pretty straightforward way of understanding if your customers are speaking well of you when they speak to others and think about you among themselves. Easy to capture the data. And while there are people that are detractors of the NPS itself, certainly very valuable in identifying if you have concerns or opportunities to address.
Excellent, accurate, and I think you're underplaying. It's essential. Every CEO I talk to, I go, do you have happy customers? They're like, yeah, I got tons of happy customers. I go, prove it. And they're like, well, what are you talking about? I go, how do you know you have happy customers? They're like, I talk to them. I say, do you think your staff tees you up with happy customers or do you get a cross section? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, why don't you send out an NPS survey? And they're like, how do we do that? Call Ken at Austin Lawrence. He'll tell you how to do it. And it's not that hard. And there's 3 buckets. If you have promoters, those are the people you put on your website and use as your case studies. If you've got detractors, you got to know that. In the old days, if you did a shitty job, you called my boss. My boss said, Tyre did it again. He called me in the office and go, Dan, don't do it again. Then I'd just go ahead and do it again. I'm a little ashamed to say that, but that's reality. Today, people are on the internet. They're on LinkedIn, they're on Twitter, they're on Instagram saying this Tyre guy didn't follow through on what he said. That is horrible. You got to make sure you have a great customer experience. You got to make sure if somebody's ticked off, you understand why they're ticked off and you get to them ASAP and you address that. You can't do that unless you're sending out an NPS and then the ancillary to that. And one of the foundations for building a great SaaS company is diversity, inclusion, and belonging. HubSpot's initiatives around DI&B are amazing. And if you want to sell to women, you better have women on your board of directors. You better have women in senior executive positions. You better have women in decision-making positions. Same thing with people of color. Same thing in a true global environment. Your staff makeup should look like the people you're selling to. And if you're still caught in the 90s and you're a bunch of old white guys, then it's not going to work. It's totally different. And you got to be attuned to inbound. You got to be attuned to NPS. You got to be attuned to your marketplace. You got to be attuned to your niche if you really want to be successful.
Absolutely. I want to ask you a couple of questions that might be some rapid fire answers for you. Tell me the difference in your mind between a growth agency and a marketing agency and why you'd look for one versus the other.
Okay, that's awesome. Just like we were saying, when I say marketing, most people want to spit in the corner because they think of the expense rather than the investment. There's very little differentiation between marketing agencies. Lots of people just start marketing agencies and very low barrier entry. So there's a lot of bad ones out there. What a growth agency does is what you just said, right? Align sales and marketing. Make sure they understand the full customer journey. Help them define the niche. The reason why it's better being done outside rather than inside is because there's tough decisions that need to be made. You do need to fire those 2 salespeople that have never going to make it. But over the last 30 years, if you wanted to have a positive impact on revenue, you hired 2 salespeople. That's not the way you do it. Now you hire Ken and his team and he'll bring the leads to the art. And if he can't, he'll tell you. It will take a year. We set the right expectations because in 2007, when we started, if you tricked out your website, you got all the business.
Definitely harder to compete today.
There are trillions of dollars at stake. Google makes $1.5 billion a month in profit by selling a Google AdWords. The organic is worth trillions and trillions. And you see people who've been doing this for 15 years, they own the front page of Google. And it's not just Google. It's also other search engines. It's also social media. It's also about the conversions. There's a lot of metrics. Number one, all you SaaS people out there, if you're not measuring, that's the 6th component of the inbound organization, data wins. And if you're not measuring it, there's no way you can improve. If you don't know your metrics, people are like, what's a metric? I'm like, what's your closing percentage? And they're like, around 32%. I'm like, how do you know that? And they're like, I'm just guessing. I'm like, no. I want to understand your closing percentage, proposal to customer, by sales team, by geography, by industry, by salesperson. How are you going to drill down and diagnose what the problem is? I got lots of clients who are closing 20% of their proposal. The closing process isn't the problem. It's that you're sending out proposals to people who are never going to sign. And then how many of those proposals do you need to have opportunities to get the number of proposals? And then what metrics do you need to improve? It's the closing percentage, it's the opening percentage, it's the leads. All that stuff is very hard to identify internally.
You can't manage what you don't measure, right?
Especially SaaS organizations. The good news is most SaaS companies understand that inbound is imperative. I would say it's the leading vertical market of companies because that's the way people buy SaaS products. That's the way you scale at the level that SaaS companies need to scale, right? The old days when we grew 15 and 20%, my second startup, like 100% growth, which is what I was in, it was extraordinary. Today, you see companies that once they figure it out, and once they figure out the process, now they can not only delight their customers, but they can scale it in an incredible way because they're paying attention to those ratios. And it's never more apparent than it is today. In 2021, outside selling is now inside selling. Offline marketing is now online marketing. I got all the statistics, right? You want to see the statistics broken down by industry, size of company, and region. Just type in HubSpot statistics COVID-19, and you'll see we track them every single week for the last year or so, make them publicly available because transparency is important. It's not people's individual information, but in aggregate, we got to explain. And what you'll see is there's a huge move to online, right? Which SaaS people understand. Traditional customer service goes to self-service. And the third employee that you hire now isn't a salesperson. It's a customer support person because you got to make sure you got happy customers. You move from the funnel to the flywheel. If you don't have a flywheel, this is my last call to action. This is my second to last call to action. If you don't have a flywheel, you call Ken today. Like, what's a flywheel? He'll send you 3 links and a little video because he's good at that. And he'll say, you need to have your customers at the forefront. And then if you have a bloated tech stack, the average company, SaaS company, has 12 different tools to take care of their website. 12? How do you remember 12 passwords? It's insane, right? No way. A small, slick, easy to use tech stack. HubSpot has HubSpot CRM, HubSpot Sales, HubSpot Marketing, HubSpot Service. Makes a huge difference. It's easy to use, and that's the new normal in 2021.
Absolutely. Hey, I want a little bit self-serving here, but I want your take on the ideal balance between in-house and agency work in 2021.
You know, if you're blowing out your number for your SaaS companies, if you're 150% of your plan, keep doing what you're doing. You've got a good program going. If you're not, all SaaS companies have 2 jobs. Number one, they got to hit their number. The key, and one of the reasons why HubSpot is worth almost $20 billion is because, well, one of the reasons is we went the first 27 months without ever missing our number. And you'll read about that in the sales acceleration formula. In 2.5 years, we never missed our monthly number, which is very, very rare. And it's the same thing. So if you're hitting your number 120%, then keep doing what you're doing. If you're not, you probably need help. Mr. Outside here, Ken, first of all, he's a super nice guy. Second of all, he will tell you, this is chapter 26 in the inbound organization. He'll tell you, no, I can't help you. And he'll help you find another agency. And he'll do it. That's the foundation and the reputation that you've built. And if Ken can't help you, just email me, dtyre@hubspot.com. An outside view will come in. And these growth agencies are relationships. It's not like a marketing thing where they're going to do blog articles for you and workflows. They'll do all that. When Ken cycles in, he's going to be like, all right, how much revenue do you want to generate this year? And you'll say $5 million of incremental revenue. And he's got like, great. How much will come from current customers? And you're like, I haven't tracked that. Well, let's figure that out. And he's got a whole routine to do it. And then how much is going to come from net new customers? And there you're going to say like $2 million. And you're like, all right, how many customers is that? How many proposals do you have to generate? That's where those ratios come in. How many opportunities do you need? How many conversations do you have to have? How many leads do you need to do? Where's your website? And he's got this whole equation that will figure it out. And then you'll be like, okay, that's a plan. And then he'll work 18 months because you have to get the seasonality of the business and understand your competitive advantage. And there's a million things to do. You got to do your personas, your ideal customer profiles. You got to add 14 different landing pages, 25 calls to action, all of that. is overwhelming for somebody who's never done it. Ken's done it hundreds of times and will say, yeah, this is the way to do it. And I never thought of it as outsourcing everything. You're still going to have marketing people. They're still going to be like working 70 hours a week. You're just going to help guide them, focus them, and make sure that they're successful.
Absolutely. It's definitely a team sport.
That's not self-serving. That is an epiphany for lots of people because SaaS owners, they're kind of cheap. They're like, I don't know if I can spend that. And I'm like, well, what's your alternative? The first time you miss your number, your investors, advisors, and board is going to be all over you. Right? You can't just like miss your number. And you got to be proving that the process, and guess what? Next year, it's 300 what you're doing now. This is your business. You do whatever you want. But I always tell SaaS owners, you make all the decisions. I'm just going to, after 5 startups, for highly successful, going to tell you. And if you go to dantyre.com, you'll see a blog article called How to Scale a Successful Startup in 2020. And it's 10 questions that you got to fill out and you got to send to Ken because he needs to know those questions before he knows if he could serve you. And if you don't write them out, then you're not serious about your scale in 2020.
Fair enough. So I'll share an insight from having read most of the Inbound Organization book. Our planning session for Austin Lawrence is on Friday. That's tomorrow. And one of the things we're going to be discussing is changing our entire go-to-market strategy to look a lot like the customers we seek to serve. So we're actually considering making our business look like a subscription business.
That's awesome. You've done retainers for a long time, right?
Yes.
Retainers are kind of like a subscription. It's like services software. It's still a SaaS business. And so you've embraced that because you're a relationship guy. If you're just looking for somebody to write a blog article, Ken and Austin Lawrence isn't for you. You've said that multiple times. I've heard you turn down business, which is hard for a lot of entrepreneurs, but you know where you do your best work. You know that there are enough business out there that if you can get that sweet spot, and every single SaaS company listening to this podcast has to do the same thing. You can help them, right? Like you're in. That's what makes you special. That's why I'm on your podcast. It's the attitude. It's the focus. I am very appreciative of you being a essential HubSpot partner, one of the components of the inbound revolution. And here's the other thing, Ken. It's not going to be all done in 2021. You and I are going to be on the same podcast in 2025. I'm going to have a few more wrinkles, a little bit more gray hair.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to say the same thing. We're going to say the same thing. It's time for you to lean in because this is 30 years. These kind of transitions take 30 years, right? We're 15 years in. So Halligan is famous for saying we're in the second inning. If you have international listeners, you're in the first half of the Premier League. And it's true. I used to think, I'm not buying that. He is 100% right. There are still people who are like, call me up all the time on LinkedIn. They're like, what is this inbound kind of thing? And that's why the book still has legs. Get a copy of it. Go to inboundorganization.com. You can get it on Amazon. And anything I could do, dtyre@hubspot.com. Go to www.dantyre.com and just drop your contact information. And have a great year, Ken. Right? 2021. Have more fun in 2021. Is that a good motto?
Yeah, I think that's a good motto. Is that your prediction? We're all going to have more fun in 21?
No, not at all. It's going to be a long, hard slog. My mantra, though, is to do the most good for the universe. And my final call to action, if I can help you, just email me, dtyre@hubspot.com. Go to www.dantyre.com. I have a boatload of fun. Love doing this podcast. And we appreciate you being a great marketing guru, a great inbound organization, a great part of the HubSpot.
Thank you for that, Dan. And thanks, everyone, for listening today. You can subscribe to the SaaS Backwards podcast on Spotify, Apple, and Stitcher. Dan, look forward to great success together in 21. Thanks so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to the SaaS Backwards podcast, brought to you by Austin Lawrence Group. We're a growth marketing agency that helps SaaS firms reduce churn, accelerate sales, and generate demand. Learn more about us at www.austinlawrence.com. You can email Ken Lempet at kl@austinlawrence.com about any SaaS marketing or customer retention subject. We hope you'll subscribe, and thanks again for listening.